Hello and welcome to the Discover History YouTube channel, and first of all apologies for not putting out a video sooner. The only problem is all our face-to-face work now is back to normal standards, so we are quite busy. So what we're going to try and do is do a video at least, and we do pray with this one, at least once a month. So today's video, we thought, as it was a lovely spring day and we're in April, we thought we'd have a look at another battle that's actually connected to an important event that's happening in a few weeks' time. Most people are probably thinking, well, that must be the coronation. However, this is older than that. It's going back 380 years. And in May, 380 years ago, we have the first siege of Worcester. And really, the start of that siege is played out here in a little village just on the southern border at a place called Ripple. Now, the Severn Valley was a very, very important place for both the Royalists and the Parliamentarians during the Civil War. The main reason for that is it held a key into areas like Birmingham, Dudley, places which were, even as far back as the 17th century, known for its metalworking, ironworking, very important for cannons, in artillery, in cannon shots specifically, but also for the powder mills as well. Not only that, the Severn Valley also has a very important river flowing through the centre with bridging points, and not too far from here we have the bridge at Upton. And then if you followed the River Severn south, you've then got Gloucester, and then if you go north of Upton, we've then got the bridging point at Worcester. And it's interesting because Parliament held Gloucester, the Royalists held Worcester, and Upton was a bit of a thorn in the side. It was so important to occupy the Severn Valley, and in particular the bridge at Upton. Now, I don't think you can see from where we're being filmed from, but in the distance over there is Upton. You can definitely see the Malvern Hills. And really, when you look at the Battle of Ripple, which took place on the 13th of April 1643, the reason for it was really Upton, because the Royalists were coming from the Worcester area, so they were coming right beyond Upton there. They were going to take Upton and hold it, therefore holding a very important key bridge. And then the Parliamentarians were coming down or coming upstream from Gloucestershire, from the direction behind Ian, who's doing the filming. So Upton was key in that opening shots as such, really. So the Royalists, when they got here, and there was about 2,000 of them, occupied that beautiful flat area with Upton behind it. So that massive open field over there was where the Prince of Maurice and 2,000 Royalists laid out, ready to move south into Gloucestershire, just literally over the border. Tewkesbury is very, very close to where we're stood. Now, on the other side of this vast field is a beautiful ridge, and we're going to film up there in a moment, and that's where William Waller, the famous William Waller of English Civil War fame, set up his strong position on a ridge along with cannon. And the interesting thing is, Prince of Maurice didn't have cannon. All he had was really a massive cavalry force and infantry, and they're literally over there. Waller, on the other hand, has got the high ground. He's got cannon, he's got cavalry, and he's got infantry, all in what would be expected to be a very, very strong position. Hello again, and what we've done now is we've moved from where we recorded last time, which is only about, well, less than 100 metres in that direction. We've moved away from Upton, and just over my left shoulder you can just about see the ridge line. Hopefully the sun is not obscuring the view. The ridge line is quite a steep one, and was probably slightly steeper as well in 1643. And Waller, who had actually came from Tewkesbury, so from Gloucestershire, literally crossed into Worcestershire, had occupied that ridge. And you'd expect a ridge being a very, very important key strategic part of the battlefield. You'd think, once you take the high ground, you're going to win the battle. That's what Waller thought. So Waller occupied that ridge. He brought with him about 1,000, just over 1,000, about 1,500 men, a mixture of cavalry, a mixture of infantry, and the unusual thing, he also managed to bring with him a small train of artillery. And what they actually did is occupy that hill. They set the guns up, facing towards Upton, where the Royalists were coming from, and it would have panned out in the normal way. Artillery would soften up the Royalists at the bottom of the hill, and then the cavalry would sweep down, the infantry would clash. That was the normal procedure. If you want to learn more about the tactics of the Civil War, remember we've got other videos under the playlist for you to visit and watch in your own time, basically. Now, the sad thing was, for William Waller, that is he thought he was in a very, very strong position. He was going to win the day and take Upton Bridge. But interestingly, the Royalists had already taken it, and they would have to fight for it again. Now, the Royalists under Prince Maurice, that was in the fields in the distance there, decided to move a lot of his musketeers to really come around and outflank the hill. So on the far side, where you can see just the trees in that direction there, Prince Maurice moved musketeers and probably dragoons as well, fast moving infantry, into the hedgerows on that flank. He also moved large numbers of dragoons and musketeers in the hedge lines up here. And Waller, by lunchtime, by around about 1 o'clock, about now actually when we're filming this, realised that he saw movement on his flanks and was worried that that position up there was not as strong as he thought, and basically he got pretty worried that he was going to be outflanked and possibly attacked from the rear where the village of Ripple actually stands. How he reacted is quite interesting. He decided there was no point in holding the ridge anymore, and at that point the main body of Royalists started to push up the hill, and he decided the safest option would be to withdraw back to Tewkesbury. So he now ordered for his entire army to move. Now, we're not 100% sure if the artillery did actually do anything, because it was said that his gunners were very inexperienced. They didn't really know what they were doing. They never had some very good gun captains with them in the train of artillery. And the other shocking thing, I think, is Waller realised that the cannons that he had stockpiled for this very engagement was actually the wrong calibre. The barrels were smaller than the cannonballs that they had. Now, they may have found some of the cannonballs small enough to fit in to fire onto the Royalists. We do not know, but there is a possibility that archaeological evidence shows that at least a couple of cannonballs may have been fired, but we don't know. All we definitely know is that the parliamentarians agreed that it wasn't a very strong position, and they started to pull back off that ridge and back into the village of Ripple itself. We'll continue the story further in the village. Hello again, and what we've done now is moved a bit closer to the village of Ripple itself. The village is literally there, it's literally within a stone's throw of where we're stood. And over my left shoulder you can just see the ridge that we were just talking about. So we're actually on the reverse of that slope now as you come into Ripple, often referred to as Nan's Hill. Now, the interesting thing is, as the parliamentarians were withdrawing, as William Waller was bringing his men back, he left a small screen of dragoons up on that hill. The only problem is, when they saw the Royalists now starting to rush up that hill, they decided to flee. And if you believe some of the stories, as the dragoons ran down into the Parliament withdrawal, it became pretty much a shambolic rout. Lots and lots of people fearing that the Royalists were about to wave right into them, that they actually started spreading down into the village at quite high speed. What William Waller then did is send in Heselrig's Lobsters. Now, Heselrig's Lobsters were famous. They were fully armoured, what was left over from the old days of Tudor in medieval knights. They were cuirassiers, they were heavy cavalry. They galloped down the sunken lane that runs down to our left here. And as they get to the bottom, they were hit by Prince Maurice's cavalry, the same cavalry that had also fought almost a year before at Powick Bridge. There was a horrible clash down there. The infantry were involved, the musketeers and the hedgerows were involved, the cavalry were fighting out pistols and swords and carbines. It would have been horrific just over there, just off that ridge in the sunken lane. It was a disaster for Heselrig's Lobsters. If you follow the accounts truly, they lost a massive chunk of their force. 70 of them rode down the lane, only about 20 of them came out of it. It must have been absolutely horrific. Parliament then continued to withdraw the Royalists came up onto this ridge, and unfortunately in the far distance towards Tewkesbury they heard news that Parliament reinforcements were on the way. Royalists cut their losses when they got to this ridge. They had won the day at Ripple. Unfortunately, it was not a complete outright win. Luckily, the parliamentarians went back across the border, consolidating at Tewkesbury and down at Gloucester itself, and this county was permanently going to be Royalist. Or was it? Would those parliamentarians attempt to raid Worcestershire again? Would they attempt to try and take Upton and possibly even Worcester? So 380 years ago, anything could happen. The county could become occupied again by the parliamentarians, or it could remain in Royalist hands until the end of the Civil War. Another interesting fact about the Battle of Ripple in 1643, and this is what I'm going to end on, is the fact that the parliamentarians threw the dice for one final time in the battle, and that was when they actually got to the outskirts of the village of Ripple, just behind me here. One of the Parliament soldiers dragged a gate from inside a field across this very road, and interestingly, as the Royalists had finished destroying, in a way, the Parliament cavalry in the sunken lane behind Ian, where he's filming from, as they came up to here, the Royalists were halted by this gate, and a lot of people even to this day say that that gate prevented a complete destruction of the Parliament army at Ripple. That left the Royalists to go back to Worcestershire and the parliamentarians to go back into Gloucestershire.